From the moment he's old enough to notice women, he's told that love is earned through pursuit. Be charming, be persistent, be romantic. Never stop trying. That's the script. And for years he follows it. He chases attention like it's oxygen. Every text, every glance, every small sign of interest feels like validation. Because deep down, he was taught that being wanted makes him worthy. But no one ever told him what happens when the chase becomes his identity. He becomes a performer, not a man. His purpose turns into performance. Every message he sends, every compliment, every effort, all of it becomes a transaction. The more he gives, the less he gets. And still, he chases. He tells himself it's noble. The good men don't give up. The persistence proves love. But what it really proves is that he doesn't know when to walk away. Because the truth is, chasing isn't strength. It's dependence disguised as devotion. He's not chasing her. He's chasing himself. The version of him that finally feels seen. But validation is a cruel god. It always demands more. So he runs faster, gives harder, sacrifices deeper. And somewhere in that endless sprint, he loses something sacred. His peace. He stops hearing his own thoughts, stops feeling his own needs. His world shrinks to one question. Does she want me? That's the quiet tragedy of the chase. It turns strong men into echoes. Men who measure their worth by reaction instead of reflection. Men who forget that pursuit without purpose is just desperation in disguise. And then one day, something inside him snaps. Not in anger, not in hate, just in realization. He wakes up and sees the pattern for what it is, a loop that never ends, a hunger that never feeds. He sees that the women he chases aren't rejecting him, they're reflecting him. They sense the void he's trying to fill. They feel the energy of a man who's searching outside for what he's missing inside. And for the first time, he stops running. The silence that follows is terrifying. But it's also liberating. Because the moment he stops chasing, he sees how much he's neglected himself. His dreams, his growth, his power. He realizes that chasing women never made him more of a man. It made him less of one. And that's where the story changes. Where he begins to trade validation for vision, approval for purpose. Because when a man finally gets tired of chasing, he doesn't become cold. He becomes conscious. There's always a moment, quiet, unannounced, when a man reaches his limit. Not the kind of limit that explodes in anger, but the one that collapses in silence. It's not one argument. It's not one rejection. It's the accumulation. The years of trying to be enough for people who were never looking for depth, only distraction. He starts to feel it like a weight. Every unanswered text. Every maybe later every time he shows up with effort and gets met with indifference. It's not heartbreak anymore. It's fatigue. The kind that doesn't make you cry. It makes you still. He begins to see the truth behind the chase, that the more he tried to prove his value, the more invisible he became. Because chasing is loud and real power moves quietly. He looks around and realizes how much of his energy was wasted trying to earn approval from people who never respected effort. Only the illusion of mystery. He remembers all the times he over-explained, over-apologized, over-invested. And for what? For someone's temporary attention, for validation that vanished as soon as he stopped performing. That's the breaking point. When a man sees the price of his own peace written in the currency of wasted time, he no longer feels the need to convince anyone of his worth. He's done selling himself for connection. He's done bleeding to prove he can love deeply. Because the truth is, no man ever wins the chase. You can't outrun emptiness. And when he realizes that, something inside him dies. The version of him that believed love had to be earned through exhaustion. In its place, something new is born. Not bitterness, not apathy, just awareness. He starts to understand that peace and pursuit rarely coexist, that chasing doesn't bring closeness, it creates imbalance, that when you chase something that runs, you teach it to keep running. So, he lets go. He doesn't make a speech. He doesn't post about it online. He simply disappears, not to escape but to recalibrate. He starts pouring that same energy back into himself. The gym replaces the chase. His goals replaces the guessing. His silence replaces the noise. And the same people who once ignored him will notice the shift, because peace has a presence. It's the moment when a man stops chasing what drains him and starts chasing what builds him. It's not the end of his story. It's the beginning of his rebirth. Because the breaking point isn't where he loses everything. It's where he finally stops losing himself. When a man stops chasing women, he doesn't just change his behavior. He changes his orbit. The entire direction of his life begins to turn inward. At first it's confusing, because the silence that follows feels heavy. No text lighting up his phone. No validation waiting in his notifications. Just quiet. But that quiet is where transformation begins. He starts noticing things he never had time to see before. How drained he'd become, how little of his day was actually his own, how much of his identity revolved around being chosen instead of being centered. So he starts rebuilding. Not for attention, not for revenge, but for alignment. The gym becomes therapy. Books become new mentors. His goals, once delayed for love, become the priority again. He starts waking up with purpose instead of pressure. And he realizes something profound. For the first time in his life, he's not reacting to the world. He's creating it. When a man shifts inward, he becomes unrecognizable, not because he changes physically, but because his energy stabilizes. He's no longer chasing outcomes. He's mastering himself. That's when peace starts to replace the adrenaline he used to mistake for love. The calm that once felt boring now feels powerful. He starts to crave solitude like oxygen, not loneliness, but clarity. See, the man who once chased attention now chases progress. He invests in silence because silence gives him strength. He's no longer addicted to being wanted. He's addicted to becoming whole. That's the shift most people never understand. They see a man pull away and assume he's lost interest. But they don't realize he's finally found himself. His focus sharpens. His emotions settle. His boundaries strengthen. He no longer lets temporary people interrupt his permanent peace. He learns to channel that masculine energy into creation instead of pursuit, building his body, his business, his future. Because the same fire that once made him chase women now fuels his evolution. And ironically, that's when people start noticing him more. Not because he's trying, but because he's not. There's something magnetic about a man who doesn't need validation. Something mysterious about the one who walks with direction instead of desperation. He's not cold. He's composed. He's not detached. He's disciplined. And that shift, from chasing to choosing, changes everything. Because the man who once begged for love now embodies it. He carries it in his stillness, in his purpose, in his self-respect. He doesn't need to be seen anymore. He's finally looking in the right direction, inward. Something fascinating happens when a man stops chasing. The energy flips. The same silence that once made him invisible suddenly makes him magnetic. Because while everyone else is shouting for attention, he's mastered the art of stillness. And stillness always stands out. When a man focuses on himself, his aura changes. He's not trying to prove anything anymore. He's not begging to be chosen. He's choosing. And that choice, to prioritize purpose over approval, sends a signal the world can feel. Women who once ignored him start to notice. They sense the difference, though they can't explain it. He doesn't chase, he attracts. He doesn't persuade, he pulls. Because confidence without need is rare. And rarity commands attention. He's not playing games. He's not pretending to be distant to seem desirable. He's just genuinely at peace. And peace has gravity. Now, when he walks into a room, his energy says, I don't need to be here, but I chose to be. That's power. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. Because he's not searching for completion. He's expressing it. The same women who once tested his patience now test their own curiosity. Why isn't he chasing? Why doesn't he react? They lean in. They study. They feel the shift. Because deep down, everyone recognizes power, even when it's quiet. He's no longer controlled by validation, so he can't be manipulated by it. He's free. And freedom is intoxicating. He's stopped being predictable. No more over-texting. No more explaining. No more seeking permission to be himself. He gives energy only where it's reciprocated and walks away the second it's not. Not in anger, not in pride, but in peace. Because when a man stops chasing, he stops negotiating his worth. He no longer treats affection like a prize to be earned. He treats it like a reflection of his own self-respect. That's why people start treating him differently. Opportunities open. Respect grows. The world responds differently to a man who no longer moves from lack. He becomes the embodiment of controlled masculinity. Power under discipline. And that's what draws everything to him. Women, success, respect, peace. He finally understands. The real chase was never for women. It was for himself. The version of him that doesn't need to run anymore. When he stopped chasing what was running from him, he made space for what was running toward him. That's the reversal. He doesn't win because he conquered anyone. He wins because he conquered himself. And that victory changes everything. There's a moment when a man realizes he's no longer fighting the world. He's shaping it. No longer reacting. No longer chasing. Just directing his own energy with intention. That's the birth of self-mastery. It doesn't come with applause. It comes in silence, in the small choices that no one sees. Waking up early when no one expects it. Saying no to distractions that once controlled him. Building something quietly, consistently, while others scroll and seek validation. For the first time, he feels what real power actually is. Not dominance, but discipline. Because mastery isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself. He starts to recognize his triggers, his impulses, his weaknesses. Not to shame them, but to understand them. He's no longer a slave to emotion or approval. He's no longer chasing highs that leave him hollow. He's steady now, grounded. The man who once chased women now chases purpose. The man who once sought validation now seeks growth. The same fire that used to burn him now lights his path. He becomes strategic with his energy. Every hour, every word, every thought has weight. He no longer throws himself at people hoping they'll see his value. He embodies value, and that embodiment changes his entire reality. Women feel it, men respect it. Life bends around it. Because self-mastery radiates something deeper than charm. It radiates certainty. And certainty is rare. He realizes that the more he focuses inward, the less he needs to prove outward. He doesn't compete with other men because he's too focused on competing with who he was yesterday. He doesn't chase pleasure because he's addicted to progress. There's a peace that comes from discipline, the kind that no amount of affection or validation can replace. Because discipline builds identity, and identity builds freedom. He starts to enjoy solitude because that's where he sharpens. He starts to love consistency because that's where results live. He stops fearing silence because silence is where vision speaks. And eventually, the same people who once doubted him will ask how he did it, how he stayed calm while others crumbled, how he built confidence without applause. They won't understand that the answer isn't magic, it's mastery. He stopped chasing because he finally understood. You can't build anything real while you're begging for attention. Peace, purpose, power. They all require focus. And focus requires letting go. That's the transformation. The moment he becomes unstoppable. Not because he's invincible, but because he's finally in control of himself. When a man masters himself, love begins to look different. It's no longer a chase, no longer a need. It's a choice. He doesn't fall in love out of emptiness anymore. He connects out of overflow. Because once a man learns peace, he refuses to trade it for chaos. No matter how beautiful the temptation looks, he's not impressed by appearance anymore. He's drawn to alignment. He's not looking for someone to complete him. He's looking for someone to complement him. And that difference changes everything. The women who once attracted him through games, mystery, and mixed signals no longer hold his attention. He sees through it now. The validation traps, the emotional tests, the subtle manipulations. He recognizes that love built on control always ends in resentment, so he doesn't play anymore. He values peace too much to gamble it away. Now, when he loves, it's deliberate, slow, intentional. He doesn't chase butterflies. He builds gardens. He doesn't want to crave. You shouldn't want to crave attention. He craves connection that feels calm, not chaotic. Because he's learned that love without peace isn't love. It's addiction. This is the new kind of man, the one who doesn't get lost in romance, because he's already found purpose. The one who gives affection freely, but never at the cost of his identity. The one who can walk away, not because he's detached, but because he finally understands that staying should never hurt more than leaving. And that's strength. It's not coldness. It's maturity. He knows that the right woman won't demand his peace as proof of love. She'll protect it. She won't need to be chased. She'll walk beside him. She won't test his patience. She'll value his presence. That's what happens when a man focuses on himself. He stops being addicted to potential and starts being loyal to reality. He stops confusing chaos with chemistry. He stops mistaking effort for connection. He realizes that peace isn't something you find after love. It's what makes love possible in the first place. And ironically, it's in that state, when he's no longer desperate for love, that he becomes the most attractive he's ever been, because nothing pulls people in more than a man who doesn't need to be pursued to feel valuable. This is where the story ends, not with a chase but with a choice. He's no longer running after anyone. He's walking in alignment with himself. And from that place, love doesn't feel like escape. It feels like home. Because the man who stops chasing women doesn't lose love. He redefines it.